Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. Today, I have an extraordinary guest. She's a friend of mine, but we have a bit of a history together. Before I share with you that history, let me read you her bio. I don't usually read bios, but I have to read this one. So here's how it goes. I am about to start reading. So, Tia Evagelou, did I say it right, Tia?
You did, yes.
Tia Evagelou is considered by many as a modern-day love doctor who lives embodiment tools and shows in the ways she relates and coaches. I think I said that all wrong, but that's okay. As a certified sex, love, and relationship coach, she champions the way for alpha entrepreneurs who struggle behind the scenes to have relationships they truly desire and get back into alignment and live the lives they truly desire in and out of the bedroom. Whether it's for business, love, or life, Tia is the wing woman who will help you live in the mastery of your intimate power. Wing woman, I like that idea. She will illuminate the path for the physical and emotional closeness of your mind, heart, and body that will bridge the connection of your inner and outer worlds with meaningful, confident, and comfortable harmony. Wow. Hello, Tia. Welcome.
Hi, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's share with everybody a little bit about how we met many years ago. I think it was actually something like 18 years ago.
Oh my God, yeah.
You look the same, still beautiful as ever.
So do you. So do you.
So here's the story.
I so remember.
Do you remember?
Go ahead.
Here's the story.
Well, what I remember is being locked in your office.
Yeah. And
you drilling me with calls and my sales tactics, and by the end of that time with you in that office, I was like your top salesperson in 3 months.
That's right.
Yeah.
So here's what happened. Tia used to work for us in a company called Upward Motion years and years ago, and we at the time used to build simulation-based assessments, and those assessments were designed to help companies make better hiring decisions. One assessment we built in particular was called the real estate simulator, and Tia was working on that particular project, selling the real estate simulator to top brokers all over North America. So she was awesome. She built some really good relationships in the company, but also with her clients. And it was a long time ago, but it was an amazing time. It was, I think, formative for all of us. So Tia, welcome. I'm super happy to have you here.
Thank you. And actually, I wanted just to comment on my whole experience with Upward Motion and building those relationships really planted a seed in how I function as an entrepreneur in my masculine and feminine. And we can go through that down the road.
Tell me about that. Well, I want to know about what you do, and then we'll come back. What do you do? How did you get from sales to being the love doctor?
Well, I've always had a passion for personal growth, and relationships and intimacy have always been, I'm going to say, measures of impact in my life. My parents were divorced. It was a high conflict divorce, just dynamics throughout my life. And then when I went through my divorce about 10 years ago, it was a high conflict divorce. And I really had to decide, who do I want to be as a woman going through this? And I have a young daughter watching me. So it was really about going on a very big journey of developing a relationship myself and learning how to have a love affair with myself, because everything stems from your relationship to self, whether it's my dynamic with my daughter, with other people, with work. So that just took me on this huge journey. And as I was on this path, I ended up getting really sick as well for about 3 years. It was life-threatening, and I had to, make another decision. It was at crossroads, do I want to live or die, and make the choice to take care of myself at another level to overcome that. And while I was in bed for long periods of time, it was like, okay, like I'm a triple A personality. Like I can't sit still even when I'm supposed to, right?
Right.
So it was like, okay, let me do my certification and apply this to other people, because there's so many people that get caught in these patterns and these ways of being that we just think are, that's the supposed to be, you know, and I feel we have it really backwards.
So you went through a high conflict divorce and
Mm-hmm.
you decided to focus on yourself. Did
Mm-hmm.
that focus end up impacting the experience of the divorce or the experience post-divorce for you?
In what way are
Like
you asking
once you
that question?
stop having conflict with other, which really is a reflection of
Mm-hmm.
like you stop having conflict internally, right? Get to a place of peace with
Yes.
the fact
Yeah.
that there is this divorce happening, then that relationship, even though you're in a state of divorce, starts to transform as well. Have you experienced that?
Oh gosh. So my divorce was the resolution of my divorce was took 10 years.
Wow.
And my marriage was only 4.5. So the relationship of my
Wow.
divorce was a lot longer than the marriage. And it was interesting. When I first had my first lawyer, he was like, "You're not ready for this fight." Right. And because I was trying to compromise and be kind, and I was in this space of like, oh, you know, I was lost. I wasn't in a grounded space of who I was. And it wasn't till that always stuck with me. And it wasn't till years later, as you know, through doing this work and realizing, how am I taking care of myself in response to this? How am I keeping my container held in a safe and sacred and healthy way as I go through chaos? Because we're always going to have, life's 50% good and 50% bad. We're always going to have things at us, but it's like, how do we stay in a place of resolution within ourselves amongst the chaos? How
Right.
can we even find pleasure amongst the chaos? So yeah, like as my mindset and my way of being was changing, the whole outcome was changing. And when I would fall into the cycles of engagement of the chaos, it would be what's happening internally,
Yeah.
that's being reflected right now. And I had to, the one thing that really helped me, sorry, is the boundaries. Like the more I got clear on the boundaries and the structure of how the relationship needed to be to function healthy, that's when I got really empowered in my
So we're
space.
going to come back to the subject of boundaries in a brief moment because I have a very strong, passionate feeling about the subject of boundaries. So we'll talk about that momentarily. But before that, so you were with me years ago when I ran my company with my ex-husband, and you were really front line in the unfolding, the demise of my own marriage that I had been in for 15 years. So man, that was a very difficult time for me, very like one of the hardest periods of my life. But I have to say, like for me, um, yeah, trying to find a way to be centered in the middle of all the uncertainty, all the fear, all the chaos, all the feelings that of threat, perceived or not, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
feelings. I started to understand as a result of my divorce that the way I show up to this divorce, the way I handle myself, the way I feel in the middle of this divorce is really central to who I become moving forward. Yeah, I
Mm.
remember that
Yeah, no,
like
and
it was yesterday.
it's powerful because we're taught the definition of feelings, but we're not taught how to experience them. So when these life altering situations show up, we're rattled and we tend to go into escape, numb out, check out because we
Mm-hmm.
don't have the capacity or the awareness of how do I experience such big emotions, whether they're good or bad. So what I do with my clients is really give them a safe container to explore the diversity of their experiences and really get into relationship with them so they're not as unfamiliar, because a lot of entrepreneurs, we're in, you know, like we're task oriented, we're as much as we can do, like it's the go go go, but
Right.
all of these are actually trauma responses to not feeling things, whether it be from the way we were parented that's impacted our love and attachment style, or just things along the way. So it's now educating people on, hey, do you understand that maybe the way you're functioning is a trauma response? And
Right.
let's undo that so you can have more deep and meaningful connection in how you like to function in life.
So why do you think that so many people have trouble in their relationships? Like the divorce rate is 50%, but even those people who aren't divorced aren't always, super happy. So why is there so much struggle with respect to relationships in particular?
Personally, I think we have it backwards. Like we're conditioned in their society that, the next best thing, the status, the achievements, what other people think, we get caught up in those things. And that's our measure for success. And then it's like, oh, if relationship, we have the wife, we have the kids, they're checklists. But we don't realize that when we actually reverse that and put the foundation of relationship connection at the forefront, and then saying, okay, these are my priorities, and I'm going to function my life around these things, you actually thrive and become more successful and happier in how things are done. Like I've had some clients, like, they've increased their businesses a certain amount, or they've had promotions, or, they didn't realize, like, wow, like my life has meaning and fulfillment. And I didn't realize that spending time, which they initially thought was a frustration or an irritation of being like, what's this going to do, whatever. But when they started doing the work and undoing these parts and investing in them, it was like, wow, this is what's actually feeding everything else. That's the life garden.
So go back. So the reason that people have struggles in their relationships is because you think that they're not investing enough time in nurturing the relationships, or is it because my experience with my coaching clients is a lot of times there's frustration in relationships because we're looking to the other person to fulfill some of our needs. And from my experience, there's no other person who could fulfill your needs truly, right? So like that setup, that contract that we make, consciously or unconsciously, is doomed to fail. When I look outside of myself to someone else to fulfill a deep need inside of me, what happens is I give up my right or my ability to serve my own needs. And then I also give that power to someone else who ultimately can't fill it. It's a formula for failure.
Yes.
So what do you think is at the core of relationship struggle?
I think it's different for every person, but you've hit on something very strong about that inward relationship to self. We typically project, we put expectations, our traumas, we want other people to fix them. And we have this, oh, well, you're my boyfriend, or you're my partner, or you're this, it's supposed to look like this.
Right.
And we don't look at what are we not filling within ourselves. So it's a cup runneth over instead of fill me up, because there'll always be something to fill up if you go from that approach. But if you go from, okay, like I'm in a relationship right now, and I notice some things come up with me of my patterns of, well, this is how my belief of a relationship in this part looks like. And now I'm projecting. So let me bring that back. So the awareness is really huge. And a lot of us don't have awareness of how we typically function. We just are on autopilot, and we're going through the motions without the relationship to self. So that, I think, is a huge thing. The other thing is the communication around that. So the awareness has to do with the self-reflection and the ability to communicate that effectively. And then another huge block is the lack of sensation. Like we typically physically actually numb out because we store emotions and our traumas physically. So when we're interacting intimately with somebody, there's actually a physical lack of sensation we sometimes go through, and we think we're broken or something's wrong with us. But when you identify, oh, that's just part of my trauma or my detachment to self, then it's like, okay, it softens and
Right.
you're able to start opening it up again.
So would you say that the key to healthy relationships is actually first having a really good, healthy relationship with oneself before you go out there and try to have a relationship with someone else?
Oh, absolutely. Like I wasn't in a relationship myself, probably a long-term relationship for 8 years. I knew there was a lot of work to do, and that's, it's an important piece. Like, you want to have a healthy relationship with somebody else, have a healthy relationship with yourself. Know what it's like to date yourself. Like, some of my best dates have been by myself. Like, I would dress up, have a nice dinner, do a bath, dance by my, like, what is it like to actually be with me?
Right.
And we don't take, people don't do that. Right? It's always like, oh, let me get somebody else, or, oh, that one's over, let me go to the next thing. Well,
Right.
what is it like to be with yourself?
Right.
Do you even
And
know?
are you even a good person to hang out with? Are you
Yes.
fun? Are you pleasant? Are you kind? Are you loving? Are you warm? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I want to go back to the subject of boundaries, because boundaries is a hot topic in my world. And I'm going to be a little controversial. So a lot of coaches in the world say, well, you got to set up healthy boundaries. And my philosophy is, I'm not so interested in boundaries, because boundaries force me to focus on what I don't want. And instead of focusing on what I don't want, like, oh, no, this is something you can't do, right? Or this is something I don't want, and don't cross that line, right? Instead of focusing on boundaries, what I want to do with my clients is say, okay, so what do you want? What kind of relationship do you want? How do we create that? How do we walk towards what we want, rather than walking away or keeping an eye on what is scary, uncomfortable, or unpleasant, right? So how do we do that? So in the world that I've created, I really talk a lot about this whole idea that I don't want you to focus on boundaries. I don't want you to focus on what you don't want. I want you to focus on what you do want, because very often that is unclear, and we don't know how to create what we want, and we don't know how to take responsibility for what we want, and we don't know how to, like, we're at the core of our lives. So when you look at your life, that life is a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your thinking. And if you don't like what you see, we have to make some adjustments by helping you think in ways that allow you to focus on what you want, where you're going, and identify the beliefs that are holding that back, that are causing problems for you.
Yes.
So I have a slightly different kind of view on this whole boundary issue.
It's funny you say that, because actually the term I use a lot, especially with my clients, is what are your standards of excellence that we need to establish, right? So it keeps it in the mindset, because so many of us have worthiness issues or deservingness at the core when we go down to those things. And when you say, yes, boundaries is a restriction and block, and I just use that language because that's what most people relate to, but when you kind of actually put it as a standards of excellence, it elevates like people feeling like a queen or a king in their own world, right? Like, to say,
Plus it focuses people on what they're looking for, what they're going for. So give me an example of a standard of excellence. I like that language.
Well, it could be you're on, you're dating somebody, or you're in a relationship, and they're really busy and they just fit you in when it works, let's say, okay, like, well, I got a busy schedule. Okay, I'll come by here and, I'll see you here. And I'll be like, well, hold on a minute. I appreciate time and I value our time together. But, my standards of excellence, that I feel like a priority. So if you have a busy schedule, that's fine. But I would really love to have time with us planned and feel like it's meaning and intended. So when you're able to do that, I am here. Right. Okay. Good. So something like that to me is, I'm setting my standard of excellence.
Good. Yeah. So here's another question for you. Have you ever encountered a client who says, look, I'm in this marriage or I'm in this relationship and it's okay, it's not great. There are parts that I'm good with, but there are parts that I'm not good with, and I don't know if I should stay or I should go. Do you ever have that?
Oh, all the time. So
actually, how do you actually?
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. How do you guide someone? What are the parameters with which a person should or can make a decision about whether or not they should stay in this relationship or leave?
Well, first I explore on doing some work with themselves so they can actually connect to themselves more emotionally to what's really happening for them. What's their truth, right? And once we get through some of that and they're feeling more empowered of really what's going on within themselves, how do they then bring that to the communication of the relationship to stand more authentically in their truth? Because sometimes it's these truths that create the intimacy. Like you think, oh my God, I don't want to reveal and I don't want to go to those places. But sometimes it's those hard places that actually bring the intimacy forward, right? And that gives a place, like there's some couples, they haven't had more deeper conversations until these things came to the forefront.
Right. Right.
But when they say, well, things are good, things are bad, there's this little story I'll tell you about. There was this man I had this conversation with, and he was like, my relationships are about 7.5 out of 10, but I know it's not greener on the other side, whatever. And he goes, but, it frustrates me why a lot of people say, why don't you leave? And I go, well, I wouldn't ask you that question. I go, and he looks at me and I go, I'd ask you, what are you doing to make it a 10? Right? And then he's like, right? And then he goes, and the next day was his birthday. And I told him, and I said, look, tomorrow's your birthday. I'm going to give you an exercise for you to do with your wife on your birthday. And they were together like 22 years, right? Mm-hmm. So I give him this exercise. And then the next morning, I just got this download and I messaged him and I said, you know what? Today's your birthday. Go out and get your wife flowers and give her a card that says, thank you for being the gift I get to celebrate in my life every day. And then tell her 3 reasons you genuinely in your heart you appreciate her, even if it's just thank you for being the mother of our daughter. Thank you for, letting me pursue my career and not, getting in the way, or thank you for always choosing us over and over again. Like whatever it is, let it be true for you, but 3 things that really connect. And then I said, and then after that, lead her into the exercise, I told you, right? So he just writes back to me like, wow. So I didn't know what he was going to do with it or whatever, but a couple days later, he sends me a message. He's like, Tia, thank you so much for the card. The flowers, like for the note, the flowers were a hit. I was like, oh my God, right? And I didn't get to talk to him until like a week later to find out what happened, right? And he's like, I go, fill me in. And he was like, well, I gave her, my daughter came home from college, kind of threw off the moment, but I still did it. And he goes, she cried. I go, yeah, no shit, she cried, like, right? And I said, what happened for you? And then he's like, I felt my heart expand. And like, I almost cried when he told me, because I said, that's the magic. Like, it's not what you're doing. Like, because he'd be like, oh, we go trips, I take her to the cottage. I go, it's the being, it's the present moment connection of intimacy that you bring to the table. That's the magic.
Yeah. So that's a good story. That got me all emotional. That's a great story. So I want to share with you something. I don't think maybe a few people know this, but so I got remarried, as you know, and I've been married for almost 11 years. And we've been doing something together every single month, ever since the first month we met, as we celebrate what's called our Luniversary. So how this happened was that I had this client, a coaching client, who was like 77 years old, also on his second marriage. And he shared with me that he and his wife were going out for their Luniversary. And I said, what is that? He said, it's the celebration of the month, the day on every month that we met. And what they do is they go out for dinner. What we do is we exchange cards every single month.
Beautiful.
So, and it's just for us like a moment to just say, hey, like maybe this month was hard, or this month was amazing, or what's coming up is really super exciting and thrilling for us. It's a moment to just stop and recognize the relationship and the fact that we're married. So we've been doing that for years and years and years and years. Interestingly, and I'm really taking a side detour here, one of our kids, so my husband came in with 3 kids, and one of our kids was sick years ago. He had cancer, and he went through cancer treatments, and he's okay now. But at the very end of his cancer treatments, when we were driving home from the hospital, I said, hey, Michael, are you hungry? He said, yes. I said, do you want to grab a bite to eat? He said, yes. I said, what do you want to eat? He said, I want a burger. I said, great, no problem. And then that day, which was the 26th of March, 6 years ago, he said, I proclaim the 26th of every month burgerversary. So celebrating events, relationships, meaning matters, right? It really, really matters. So how do we celebrate relationships? How do we
Well,
celebrate the important events in our lives?
yes, and it's the small moments, it's the small details that
Yeah.
we just take time to pause and being like, even with my
Yeah.
daughter, something I do with my daughter every time she's at her father's. Every day I send her 3 to 5 things I appreciate. Today I appreciate this about you. Today I appreciate
Amazing.
this. Just something to keep us connected. And then when we come back to each other, it's like, oh my God, like I'm so happy to see you. So like the richness and the value isn't the
Yeah.
stuff we buy or that do. It's just the intention and the heart and the connection. So, but a lot of people I notice, especially, I get a lot of men that come to me, they're like, just show me the way, Tia. Like, I want to be a better lover. I want to be, but I don't have the access or the tools, or my mind just doesn't think like that right now, but I want it. So it's going through the baby steps. So one, that they can experience what it feels like to receive that. And then so they have to be willing to receive it to also know how to give it, right? So that's the part that it's, you know, we slowly open them up to.
Nice.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Why is sex such a big part of relationships? Like, why do we, like, are we putting too much focus, emphasis on this whole business of sex?
Oh my God, you're talking I think sex is medicine. Like, you're talking to the wrong woman.
Okay, so
You
tell
know,
me about that.
The more and more I learn about sexuality, and just it's such a healing, it's such a place of union. You know, when we orgasm, it's our one moment to taste enlightenment. And it's not even about the goal of orgasm, but learning to be in the wave of pleasure without a destination, but allowing ourselves to exchange this surrender and power and vulnerability. And when we allow ourselves to nourish, it's like we're showering ourselves with this deeper capacity of our, I'm going to say, of our potential. We actually bring that into other parts of our lives. Like when we have healthy sexual vitality, like we're happier people, we do better in our jobs, we connect better to people, we feel more beautiful, we thrive in so many areas. So for me, you know, healthy, conscious sexuality, like sexual relationship is a huge ingredient for me in healthy partnerships, and really investing. A lot of us don't invest the time to say, like, unless you're having sex 3 times a week, like you're not doing it enough. And one of those sessions should be at least 2 to 3 hours long. You know, are we doing that?
So let me ask you a question. Not long ago, I had a guest on my podcast, and she shared that she actually schedules sex once a week with her husband. She has 2 kids, life is busy, things are going on, and it's better to have scheduled sex than no sex. What do you think about that?
You know what, I'm all for it, whatever it needs to take for the couple. Like, you know, I would be scheduling sex 3 times a week, but then it gives you something to look forward to, anticipate. Like, you get to flirt and tease, knowing that's our day, that's our time. Like, how are we building up for it? There's so many ways that we can actually even use scheduled sex as a playground. And even be in the bedroom, sex gets to be our playground. That's the adult playground, where we get to try on different personas, different expressions, different parts of ourselves, and be held in that and be celebrated in that. So I think that's such a beautiful space to keep coming into, because in our everyday lives we have these roles and these functions, and they become mundane. But when you use the bedroom as a place of exploration and play and surrender, you get to go into this range of yourself that is expansive.
Interesting. Okay, so what do you say to people who say, you know what, I've been in this relationship a long time, I love my husband or I love my wife, but I'm not in love with them?
Well, a lot of that sometimes is like, what's your relationship to yourself? Are you in love with yourself, right? Because you're not going to love anybody unless you have that there, and you're going to, the next one will be like a drug, a quick hit. You might have that euphoric for a period of time, and then you're going to go back to the same place because you're not dealing with the root cause.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So you mentioned before that your experience working with us through Upward Motion impacted you somehow.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It planted a seed, and there's two stories I'll tell you about that. Like, I so remember when you're like, okay, Tia, go out in there and train everybody else. And I'm like, well, you know, whatever you're doing, you go train them. I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, right? I go, I'm just being myself. I'm being authentic. And then when I had look back and reflect on that moment, because that was a very pivotal moment for me, I looked at, well, I'm connecting to their needs. I'm listening. Even if I'm not the solution, I'm helping them find a solution.
Right.
And that authenticity built trust, um, deeper relationships. They came back to me, and then I'm like, this, whether it's business, life, love, this is what it's about.
Right.
So that planted a seed. And then afterwards, I was for 7 years working in my father's business, general contracting business. So it was family run, operated business. And I was helping him run that. And you're dealing with a very male dominated industry. It's general contracting. And I was always very competitive and coming to meet them like, oh no, I can meet you in that space. And I was going in from a very masculine energy, because that's how we're taught too. You want to succeed as a woman, like be tough, go get it, and hold your own space. But I really like, I would always feel this resistance or this challenge functioning from that. And as I was doing this work myself, I was like, I wonder, what if I functioned from this place, from the feminine? What would it look like? Because I'm like, you know, we're collaborators, we're nurturers, we're protectors. Like we have all these natural gifts as feminine. What if I brought them in? So I started exploring and shifting that in, and the whole environment transformed. Like my relationship with my father, he was more trusting. He was coming to me for more solutions. I was more credible with him. Even trades and contractors, they were like, oh, Tia, like there's this like conflict resolution became my thing. They're like, Tia, you're the woman, you're nurturing, you're, you know, collaborative, you're nurturing, you're a leader in a very soft but stern way. They brought me in. Even I was project managing a bunch of big jobs, and they were like, Tia, we're only, you know, we want you here. You're the only person we want here because you get us. You know, so it really shifted so much. I'm like, wow, if more women understood the power and influence they can have from functioning from their feminine, they can really be in more ease and flow within themselves, I find. Because
so that's very interesting. So tell me about who you coach and how you coach them, and how do people find you?
So I coach virtually. So I have clients all over the world. And it's done through a series of talk, embodiment practices, a lot of mind-body dialogue. So we work on rewiring, first identifying how the body is functioning, because even though cognitively we could do therapies that help us understand our situations or why we're functioning, the body holds things on a cellular level, which is much deeper. So it's bringing the consciousness to the unconscious of the body, and then rewiring the mind-body relationship. So now there's new pathways that you can operate from. There's meditations as well. And then there's a lot of individual practices I leave for the client to do with themselves or with their partner. I always prefer to work, even when it comes to couples, working with the individuals first, because it's like measuring what is that relationship to self, because that's the foundation. And then you bring those two foundations as pillars into the foundation of the relationship as a whole. And what was the third question? And currently right now, my clients have been mostly through referrals.
And are you working mostly with men or women?
You know what? I'd say it's about 60 women, 40 men. I do get a lot of men that do inquire to work with me. And it's more of the curiosity before they step into it, right? What is it? They have a lot of questions, but.
So how do they find you?
Well, my website, I have my website, tiaevagelou.com. My Instagram is tiaevagelou.com. Tia Evagelou, or they can just email me, tia@tiaevagelou.com.
EVAGELOU. Good. Say it one more time all
So it's
together.
Tia, Tiaev, as in Victor, Agelou.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Tia, I'm amazed at your journey. I'm amazed at how far you've come. I'm amazed at where you started and where you are now, and how you took your life's experiences and brought you to this point. It was a pleasure, an honor to have you on this podcast with me and to learn from you. And so I thank you for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, too. It's always a pleasure to connect with you and be in your space at any level. So thank you for having me on your podcast. And I really appreciate the time.